I see you all the time, too, you're a thief. He must have said something. Also, Wharton. No words to describe it. Oh my God, what a wonder. Grow up and go away like a fart in the wind. Shawshank was meant to be a huge disappointment. It only made $727, or $327 in its first weekend, and came in 13th place. The movie was almost taken out of cinemas by the studios. The director got very depressed because he thought the end of his job was near. Then, one strong man made a choice that kept the movie alive. He showed it over and over on his network, sometimes twice a week. Some people said it was obsessed. It was called clever by fans. What he did next made a movie that didn't do well at the box office into the best movie of all time. In 1987, Stephen King made a choice that seemed small at the time but changed the history of movies forever. For just $5,000, he gave Frank Darabont the rights to his short story Rita Hayworth and the movie Shawshank Redemption. The real twist didn't happen for a long time, though. King never cashed the check. The money wasn't necessary for him. He was already making a lot of money every year by that time. The movie came out in 1994 and slowly became a masterpiece. After that, King framed the check that hadn't been paid and mailed it back to Darabont. There was a note with the words "Love, Steve, in case you ever need bail money." That one framed check became Darabont's most loved item. He didn't care about the Oscars. Nothing could ever compare to that check. In 1983, no one had ever heard of Darabont. In Hollywood, no one knew what his name was. King had only seen a short film by him called The Woman in the Room, which was based on one of his stories. That was part of King's Dollar Babies scheme, which gave student filmmakers $1 to make movies based on his books. Darabont begged King for a chance in a letter he sent in 1980. King didn't think twice when he finally asked to adapt Shawshank. But everyone else believed King was crazy. Don't put any money on Darabont because he didn't have any big movies or real relationships. But King had more faith in him than anyone else. Plus, it was really tough to get the story written in the first place, which made this even stranger. The book that had Shawshank in it, called Different Seasons, almost never came out. King's distributors told him it wasn't going to sell. They didn't understand why 4 stories were put together. People told me it was too strange, too long for magazines, and too short to sell as a book. The worst part was that they didn't like that the stories weren't scary. King was asked to keep doing what he was known for. So that the marketers would be happy, King had to agree to add one scary story at the end of the book. That story was The Way of Moving. He might have stayed locked up in a drawer without it. But the story had even more emotional weight to it. King wrote it when things were very bad for him. He was hooked on everything in the early 1980s. He drank a lot, snorted cocaine from bottles and plastic bags, smoked a lot, took pills like Xanax and Valium, and even drank NyQuil and Listerine. He was going downhill. In the end, he said he couldn't remember writing whole books like Kojo. He wrote about hope and forgiveness even though he was struggling with addiction himself. Tabitha, his wife, had had enough by 1987. The woman set up a rescue. There was dried blood and snot on every bottle, bag, and Coke spoon that she threw on the floor. Family and friends stood there quietly. That's when he knew he had to change. It was more than just a story, then. It was a way for him to get out of jail. It was still a mess when it was time to make it into a movie. Rob Reiner, who was in charge of Stand By Me, also wanted to head up this project. He gave Darabont $2.5 million just to walk away. He had even thought about casting Harrison Ford as Red and Tom Cruise as Andy. Cruise was one of the biggest stars in the world after leaving the company. But Darabont said no. The movie would have had 2 big names and a well-known director if he had said yes. He was eager to tell the tale himself. He agreed to take $750,000 and a share of the income. Just to stay in charge of his creativity. In the beginning, was really interested. He seemed happy when he came to table reads. But it made him more nervous the more he thought about it. Darabont did not earn his trust. He thought the young director was too new and hadn't done enough work before. Cruise had already worked with famous people like Rob Reiner. He didn't want a newbie to mess up a job this big. He then pulled out. Later, Darabont said Cruise was smart and was being attacked unfairly, but that choice changed everything. Then Kevin Costner showed up. He was on a high after Dances with Wolves at the time. Darabont also asked him to play Andy. Costner did pass, though. Instead, he went to film Waterworld. The movie lost a lot of money, $170 million. Until then, Shawshank climbed the ranks to get the best score on IMDb. Costner later said that his biggest mistake was not even turning down Shawshank. Because of personal family matters, it turned down Platoon years ago. Still, a lot of people thought Shawshank was the one who got away. It was just as hard to cast Red. In the first book, Red was Irish American and 57 years old. His red hair was turning gray. Now you know where the nickname came from. Rob Reiner first thought of stars like Harrison Ford, Paul Newman, Robert Duvall, Gene Hackman, and Robert Redford and got them to work with him. His favorite was Harrison Ford, but one by one, they all failed. Robert Redford might have been too busy running quiz show to do it, which ended up going up against Shawshank at the 1994 Oscars. It was close for Clint Eastwood. He talked to Darabont about the idea a few times and liked it. He finally said no because his face was too familiar. He thought people would rather watch Clint Eastwood than read. He didn't want to ruin the mood of the movie. The book was then read by Morgan Freeman. He said it was one of the best things he had ever seen. His only goal was to be a part of it, not what job it was. But he put the book down when he saw on the first page that Red was Irish. He said, "I can't play an Irishman." On top of that, he thought the jail was too sad. It scared him that he would have to shoot something so sad for months. Darabont had to call him himself. Over the phone, he read each scene out loud. That love made Freeman change his mind. Freeman had to try out 3 more times after that. The people at the studio weren't sure about his voice. They thought it might get in the way too much. They were afraid that his words would be too loud to hear what was being shown. Every time, he had to record new parts of commentary to show that he could strike the right balance. They finally said yes after the 3rd try. That is how Red Freeman got his name. Andy asks Freeman why he's called Red in a quiet scene in the middle of the movie. Freeman smiles and says, "Maybe it's because I'm Irish." That one line was a joke between people who knew each other. It paid tribute to King's original figure while welcoming the new one. Fans of the book got a wink, but it worked for everyone. That line was often used to talk about the movie. The Ohio State Reformatory, where The Shawshank Redemption was shot in 1993, is one of the scariest and most haunted movie sets ever. It wasn't just a jail that had been left empty. It was a place full of grief. In the 94 years it was open, more than 200 men died there. There were killings, suicides, and deaths from sickness and not getting care. It closed in 1990 because a federal case said it was torture to keep 2,200 men in a room that was only meant to hold 500. Temperatures hit 95 degrees inside cells for people who were locked up alone, called the hole. In the pitch-black heat, one man killed another. Some people went crazy. If you go back 3 years, the film crew said the walls still felt like they were holding pain in. Frank Darabont said that everyone in the group felt it. In his words, it was a heavy, dark feeling that you could sink into the stone. They began filming there in the summer of 1993, but there was no electricity, heat, or running water. Everyone worked 15 to 18-hour days, and the only help they had was fire trucks and engines that pumped in water. The broken windows let all the weather in. The East Wing had the biggest steel cell block in the world. It was 6 stories tall and had 100 cells on each floor. It was rusty, falling apart, and the paint was peeling off of it. Set decorator Terrence Marsh said it didn't need anything else because it already looked terrible. The look was not the only thing that was dangerous. People got sick there. There was asbestos and lead dust in the air. There were backups of garbage. A lot of crew members had to get medical help for exposure. If you test the water in one of the caves with a chemist, they will tell you that it is poisonous. Robbins wouldn't film in it until the stream was blocked off and chlorine was added to it. But it was still dangerous even then. Andy Gets Away Through the Tube was filmed with a fake mix of water, chocolate syrup, and sawdust. But that wasn't enough to hide the real danger. The cave still smelled like cocoa, according to the crew. Things got even worse when there was a fire that almost destroyed everything. Darabont and an extra named Michael C. Poole were taking a break and going to get coffee when they saw fire. Someone on the group put a hot lamp too close to some plastic wrap over a window, and the lamp caught fire. The fire could have burned down the whole set if Darabont and Poole hadn't walked by at that time. Months of work in the building itself. It cost a lot of money for Castle Rock to rebuild parts of the jail, and it almost all burned down in minutes. The set was even more interesting because many of the characters were real people who used to be prisoners. The movie makers couldn't find enough locals to play the parts, so they hired men who had been to halfway houses and done time for certain crimes. One man who had been to that jail and done time there said the movie felt eerily true. The way people stood, talked, and even the looks on their faces. The ex-convicts didn't have to act like they didn't know how to behave in jail. That sometimes made the set feel really dangerous. Tim Robbins got really into his role by spending hours in real solitary confinement. He told the guards to treat him like a real prisoner. There was no sound, no one else in the cell, and no other things to do for several hours at a time. The cell was only 6 by 8 feet. It made him shake. He looked pale and upset when he came out. He later said that it had a bigger effect on him than he thought it would and that it made him understand how desperate real prisoners are. During one of the movie's calmest scenes, Morgan Freeman hurt himself. He had to throw that ball over and over again for 9 hours for the scene where he and Andy are just throwing a baseball around. Darabont planned to shoot it from all sides. Freeman never said anything bad, but the next day he came in with a sling around his neck. His left arm wouldn't move. The pain went on for weeks. James Whitmore, who played Brooks, insisted on being the one to work with the real crow. He was 73 years old. The bird, whose name was Jake, was mean. It bit and scratched him. He wouldn't use a fake double, though. He said that he had to get close to the bird to make Brooks seem real. During the worm scenes, he even let the bird eat his hand. He was bitten and scratched so many times that his hands were full of small cuts. He called them battle scars. Don Bob Gunton, who played the cruel Warden Norton, got in a lot of trouble for keeping in character. He thought about the part a lot. He got up from sleep. He lost his hunger. He had to go to the doctor because worry was making his stomach hurt. He said that he didn't understand how much darkness he was holding until the movie was over. Even back then, it took therapy to get rid of the part for good. He later said it changed the way he thought about acting. Tim Robbins learned how to pick locks in a real way. He learned how to open jail locks with real tools by working with former prisoners and security experts. He worked out for months. The scene wasn't in the final movie, but Robbins got so good at it that locksmiths said he might be able to pick locks in real life. It's funny because he learned the skill that his character was supposed to have. And could not even show it. The movie didn't do well at the box office when it came out on September 23, 1994. It only made $727,321 in 33 houses. That's around $22,000 for every building. This was a terrible $25 million movie with 2 big stars. It came in 13th that weekend and made up only 2.6% of the movie's total gross. Almost, they took it out of all cinemas. The reviews were the only thing that kept it going. It got great reviews. People who saw it told their friends about it. Producer Liz Glotzer said the watch tests were the best they had ever seen. It was still hard for everyone because of the low start. Then something strange took place. The movie began to play again. Slowly. It was shown in cinemas again in 1995, after being nominated for 7 Oscars. At that point, people began to notice it. But the battle was tough in 1994. It was still going strong after making more than $330 million. With $763 million made around the world, The Lion King was the most successful animation movie ever. Pulp Fiction came out on the same day as Shawshank and quickly took over. There were also big hits like Speed, The Mask, True Lies, and Interview with the Vampire that were taking over the box office. There wasn't enough room for a quiet prison play. Not all test screenings were good either. Some people left the room. They said it went on too long, was too sad, and moved too slowly. A lot of people said they didn't like how there were no women in the movie. To market, which was tough. Some people said it wasn't satisfactory because the bad guy wasn't killed in a strong or loud way. It was even harder to get theater owners on board after hearing this. Frank Darabont was hurt by the loss. He said he felt very sad and believed he had ruined his future. He felt awful about letting Stephen King down. He turned down other jobs. He wasn't sure if he would ever direct again. He felt like he had failed every day. It wasn't until the movie did well on VHS and cable TV that Darabont learned he hadn't made a bad movie. He made something that will last forever. Hollywood almost didn't make The Shawshank Redemption. It took $25 million to make, but only $16 million was made at the box office when it first came out. But what began as a quiet letdown slowly turned into one of the most beloved movies ever. Along the way, there are unexpected turns, quiet fights, and a lot of devoted fans. The movie's director, Frank Darabont, had to be very careful from the start. The MPAA rated the movie R because it has bad language and crime in jail. But behind the scenes, people were afraid it would be hit with an NC-17 grade that is even worse. Darabont had filmed some very honest scenes, mostly with Boggs Diamond and the group of girls called the Sisters. The things they did to Andy were very upsetting. The hardest part for the directors was dealing with scenes that made it look like Byron Hadley and other guards were raping prisoners and beating them badly. The video was very creepy, so Darabont changed them just enough to make the point clear without making them look bad. He didn't want to take away from the movie's soul, but he also knew it had to get good reviews. One more choice Darabont made was to never show the whole story of Red's crime. In the first short story by Stephen King, Red cut his wife's brake lines to get money from her life insurance. Things went very badly wrong, though. A friend and her baby were riding with his wife when they all died. That background story wasn't used in the movie, and there's no real proof that it was ever shot. Red just says that he is the only guilty person in Shawshank. People only talk about who he is now, not who he was. One of the most talked about parts of the movie was also one of the most memorable. Andy had to crawl through 500 yards of sewage to get away. There was oatmeal, chocolate syrup, and a few other foods in what looks like raw trash. A lot of people still thought it was gross. Studio executives were afraid that it would make people sick in the theater, but Darabont wouldn't cut it. He thought about the time Andy came out of the pipe and raised his arms in the rain. That was the whole point of the story. That pain might lead to freedom. You can only be born again after something bad has happened. It was fine with him that scene stayed in. Not everyone liked the movie in some places. At first, Malaysia banned it because of the violent content and bad words. What happened in China, though, really stood out. After blind human rights activist Chen Guangqing got out of house arrest in 2012, the Chinese government stopped searches for words like embassy, Shawshank, and blind person. People thought of Andy's prison break when Chen escaped, and the Chinese government didn't want anyone to make that link. Even though it was banned, the movie made it to China in the end, but in a different form. In Shenzhen in January 2024, the first full-length Chinese play opened. Western artists played the parts. A lot of scenes were cut from the movie that was made. Darabont shot a lot more violent scenes than we saw. In a scene that was cut, a jail guard was following Andy's tunnel and throwing up because of the smell. Then Red laughed so hard that he had to spend 2 weeks locked up alone. The Summer of Love is the name of another scene. Showed Red in the 1960s after he got out of prison. He had a panic attack at the grocery store because he felt overwhelmed by braless women and hippies. Because some of these scenes were so raw, Darabont didn't even put them on the DVD. He later said that some of them made him feel bad. This could have all been forgotten about in the history of movies if not for Ted Turner. He got the rights to Shawshank by mistake when he bought Castle Rock Entertainment in 1993. He made a brave choice in June 1997. It was shown over and over on TNT, sometimes twice a week or more. So often did it happen that some joked that it played every 5 minutes. Turner liked the movie so much that he is said to have watched it 15 times. It was cheap for him to show because he owned both the studio and the channel. He might be able to charge a lot for ads, though. People saw the movie again because of that endless play. It quickly became one of the most watched shows on cable. Later, Darabont said that Turner was the only person who kept the movie from going away. It kept going. Around the middle of the 1990s, college kids took over. They started setting up midnight shows on college campuses across the United States. These weren't studio shows. The students did it on their own. They would all go to the theater at night just to see it together. It has been done for years, and some places still do it now. People would quote lines like "get busy living" or "get busy dying" when they got together in dorms and film parties. This movement grew into a huge wave. By 1995, over 320,000 copies had been shipped, making it the most rented VHS tape in the US. Then the Oscars came around. Nominations for the movie came in 7 times in February 1995, which shocked everyone. The film was up for Best Picture, Best Script, Best Cinematography, Best Editing, Best Score, and Best Sound. Morgan Freeman won Best Actor. It was crazy for a movie that had only made $16 million. The buzz made the movie come out again in screens. The amount now stands at $28.3 million, thanks to the extra $12 million. It didn't get any Oscars. It won 6, with Pulp Fiction getting the award for Best Script. He did get something else, though. Pay attention. The attention of the Oscars shown on Warner Home Video. An excuse to send those 320,000 VHS copies. It paid off, so they bet a lot. On the web, the story kept going. This movie was the first one to ever get to number 1 on IMDb. It stayed there for over 25 years. A mean of 9.3 stars from more than 3.1 million reviewers. It was better than The Dark Knight and The Godfather. On July 31, 2015, Guinness World Records said it was true, saying it was the most watched movie on IMDb. People who missed seeing it in theaters fell in love with it when they saw it online. The word kept getting out through forums and early fan sites. The web brought it back to life. The movie got a lot of love in places other than the US, like Japan, Germany, and India. It made $73.3 million overall, but only $28.3 million in the United States. It made $45 million abroad. The ideas of respect and quiet strength really hit home in Japan. German viewers liked how it told a story with many layers. Film students and English-speaking moviegoers in India thought it was the best example of a powerful movie. The movie's message of hope could be felt anywhere and was praised by critics from all over the world. Everything was important, even the smallest things. Andy's rock hammer was hidden in a Bible that wasn't cut up by accident. It was carved starting with the book of Exodus, which tells the story of slaves who escaped their chains. It was a slight nod to Andy's own escape from jail. To leave is what the word Exodus means. Darabont said for a reason he chose it. Now that the guard has found the hammer, the line's salvation lies within hits twice as hard. There were also some other small details. When Tim Robbins got dark lines under his eyes, it was only after nights when Andy would have been digging. They did it to show how hard his double life was on him without him having to say a word. They didn't really age his face, but they did make it look tired scene by scene. Some watchers were confused about how Andy put the poster back over the hole after crawling into the tunnel. It was easy to figure out. He only taped the corners on top, leaving the bottom one untied. He could then sneak through, and the billboard would fall back into place on its own. If you look closely, you can see how the corner hangs when the guard hits it with the rock. Brooks carved Brooks was here into the wall after he got out of jail. After many years, Red did the same thing in the same place. There was no chance about it. It showed that putting people in institutions changes them in the same way for everyone. Red, on the other hand, finds Andy's letter in wealth. That changes everything. He has a reason to keep going. Andy's chess pieces also told a story. The moves were the same as those used in a real game in 1955. Some people think Andy's last name comes from the players in that game. Really, that shows how much thought went into every little thing, even if it's not true. Andy wasn't just passing the time. He was making plans one step at a time. Then there was the oak tree that Andy told Red to see. People told stories about that tree. It was in Ohio for 200 years. But lightning struck it on July 29, 2011. There were already holes in parts of the tree from the ants before the hit. It stood for 5 more years until July 2016, when strong winds finally took it down. People in the area made collectibles out of the wood. It costs $40 for a simple keychain. It costs $85 to buy a small rock hammer. It costs $130 to buy a bottle opener. It costs $500 for a shadow box to hold Andy's letter. The tree was cut down in April 2017, but people can still hold on to pieces of it. Two Chances is really the story of the Shawshank Redemption. It's a movie that almost didn't exist, about a man who went through hell, and about hope that had to be saved. A man named Ted Turner had to watch it 15 times, edit it well, and have some strange luck for it to work. But it made it in some way. And like Andy, it didn't just stay alive. It got away.